How's everybody doing today? Yes. By the way, I want to big a good shout out to everybody who has been here all day. Also, those who have been watching us, our live feed on X. This is the last panel today, but I promise this will be the best one that you have all been waiting for all day. I should also say I'd be remiss, obviously, if I didn't say the tragedy that happened last week and the importance of having impassioned, disagreeable debate and how important that is right now. But I think we're going to have a really good time with these two gentlemen here today. They need no introduction, so we're just going to get right to it because we're running out of time already, Stephen A. Let's start with the big picture here. Have sports really become more political than ever, or are you guys making it so?
I think we're making it so to some degree. That's not to say that there isn't politics involved. There's politics involved in everything, and we understand that. I just think that when you look at the conscientious observers that exist within professional sports, well, compare that to the 60s, compare that to the 70s. They were far more conscientious back then than they are now. I think that there was a natural inclination back in the day to be more assertive and forthcoming about your opinion, your beliefs, et cetera, because we were devoid of civil rights. Obviously, civil rights legislation came into effect in 1965, and even in the aftermath of that, it was still a struggle. If you listen to the James Browns of the world, the Bill Russells of the world, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was formerly Lou Alcindor of the world, and people like that I've spoken to over the years, this is what they've said. Whereas in today's day and age, with the exorbitant amount of dollars that exist, that these players are earning a lot more often than not, you see a reluctance for folks to get involved until your community is in your face, compelling you to speak up and speak out about issues that you may, at that particular moment in time, be detached to because you're no longer as connected to your community as you like to believe and you like to disseminate to the masses. And because of that, feeling that compelling feeling, you see a lot of guys coming out and speaking out. But the natural instinct to do so now, from what I've been told by those back in the day, didn't measure up to what it was back then.
And Clay, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I want to give Stephen A. credit. You mentioned the Charlie Kirk situation. I think everybody who disagrees, no matter what the disagreement is, needs to be having civil conversations. I thought what Stephen A. said about the Charlie Kirk situation was 100% right. Anybody out there watching right now, I bet Stephen A. would echo this with me. Whether you agree with me, whether you agree with him, whether you think both of us are morons, violence is never the answer. And good spirited debate, going after people for things you agree or disagree with, is the foundation, I think, of an American republic and our democracy. I think free speech is the most important right that we have, but it can never extend into violence. And I hope that a lot of the young people out there, particularly that were struck by Charlie Kirk's public forums, I hope that they don't take the lesson that violence is the answer. And certainly, if you're as old as me or Stephen A., you should know better. But if you don't, let that be I think, a stringent and sterling call for civility when it comes to that. On the question you asked, I'm old school in some ways in that I think Michael Jordan was right. I think it depends on what your brand is, but I think sports is a unique uniter. I just watched, unfortunately, my University of Tennessee Volunteers choke away a win against the Georgia Bulldogs. Great game this weekend.
Won't be the last time.
But every time I'm in an arena, every time I'm in a stadium, when you're rooting for the home team or you're sitting around people that are with you, you don't think about race, you don't think about religion, you don't think about gender identity or whatever the heck it is, you just high-five people. Sports bring us together. And the reason I referenced Jordan was I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And Jordan now has said that he did say it, but he said Republicans buy sneakers too. I think there are a ton. Adam Silver was just on this stage. I think there are millions of Trump voting hardcore NBA fans. I don't know that Adam Silver believes that, but I think if he did, they would not have gotten as political and turned off some of those fans who say, man, I love Donald Trump, and I also love the NBA. And so if you're trying to appeal to everyone, which I think the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, they all should be, then I think you should be saying, hey, I don't care about your politics at all. I want you in our stadiums, our arenas, and we want to bring everybody together.
All right, we'll talk to the NBA in a second, but what changed, Stephen? What has happened that now it feels more political than ever?
Well, it feels more political because there's people like Clay Travis complaining about it. That's why it feels that way. And I say that, affectionately because, Clay and I, we've been on each other's shows. We've certainly disagreed, but like he said, we're not disagreeable. I respect this man. I respect what he's accomplished with Outkick. I respect the work that he puts forth with his show with Buck Sexton and these guys. And just because I don't agree doesn't mean I can't learn from some of the things that he says. To learn your perspective, here's what we have to concern ourselves with. I'm interested in hearing what your perspective is and why you feel differently than I do. The power structure that exists, and I would encourage white folks to remember what I'm about to say, because this is incredibly important. When a lot of black folks are talking about racist or racism and things of that nature, they're talking about things, we're talking about things from a systemic perspective. If we're judging you as an individual just because you're white, we're wrong.
Yeah.
Without question. But when you speak to the system, and the system that has existed historically and how it has served, it has worked to silence or quiet those voices along the way as much as they could possibly get away with. That's when you see people bringing up the raised eyebrow, the suspicions, wondering whether or not you want those voices to be heard. So when Clay just brings up what we're talking about, for example, with NBA players or whatever, he's absolutely right from a broad perspective. The sports ain't about that. Sports is about, competitive competition. You're wearing the same uniform. Your contemporaries playing in the same league. Sportsmanship comes into play. All of those things are relevant. But when you talk about how we don't want politics to be a part of the equation, as a white individual who happens to play, for example, or coach, or as an executive in the league, you're not getting that noise from your community to be political the way the black athlete, the black coach, the black executive is. I am a sports commentator. This is when the Trayvon Martin situation came about, when you had the wannabe cop that killed him in Florida and all of this stuff. What happened is that even though I was a sports reporter, you had the black community saying, what you gonna say about this? You can't be silent about this. You gotta address that topic. And I don't expect, nor do I resent the fact that Clay Travis may not know that noise coming from my community, that pressure, that push to address the issue, to give a voice to the voiceless, is one of the pressures that those athletes feel, that those coaches feel, that somebody in my position may feel. You may never have to go through that because the white community isn't compelling you to do that. But the black community, who makes up about 13.6% of the population, who always is suffering a bit more than the white community in terms of unemployment, in terms of affordability issues and things of that nature. When you live in a life like that and you have those challenges, those players who have financial cachet, who have a voice, they're not saying to you, look, man, I really, really don't want to touch this, but I got a community out here that's all over me insisting that I do touch it. And a lot of times when I listen to somebody like Clay, what I like about Clay is this. Clay is the kind of person that'll pick up on that unspoken pressure that we don't allude to, and he'll bring it up, which gives you the license to say, there we go. That's the question I was waiting for, because folks don't really realize what I'm going through. And if more white commentators, pundits, people in positions of power really, really understood the sensitive pressure that emanates from our communities and how they're trying to compel us to speak more about this issue, which forces us to do so, then you'd have a greater understanding as to why folks choose to address those subjects.
What I would say, too, in response to that is, it's actually some of the white guys in the NBA that are the most outspoken politically. Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich. And I just think it's a bad look for the NBA.
Is it because they take a more progressive stance?
I don't think it would have been a good decision for the NBA if they had said, hey, we think Donald Trump is the greatest president who's ever existed. Because as I just said, you're turning off NBA fans that love Donald Trump. I think if you say, hey, Kamala Harris is the greatest presidential candidate ever, or Joe Biden is the greatest presidential candidate ever, I think it's the same thing, right? You're turning in a 50-50 country. My idea would be sports should bring everybody together. I got a theory here. I don't know. People may disagree with it. What's the last thing that everyone in America trusts? Scoreboard. Think about it.
Because the scoreboard doesn't lie?
I say politicians, but go ahead.
If somebody steps on a three-point line or doesn't get a foot in, we immediately zoom in, everybody looks at it, and they says, that's a touchdown, that's a three-pointer or a two-pointer. I think the reason why everybody treats the scoreboard fairly is because it starts 0-0. And over the course of the game, the meritocracy of the athlete and the athletic figure is the best man or woman. Now, not the best man pretending to be a woman, which is its own craziness that's going on right now. And I think what Stephen A. is elucidating is actually somewhat interesting because the numbers on the 2024 presidential election, 21% of black men voted Trump. Mm-hmm.
And why do you think that was?
It's a great question. I think it's because men see the Democrat Party as emasculated. And if you want my big picture view, I think a lot of the struggles that we're seeing in life is absent fathers and men not being allowed to be men. I got 3 boys that I'm raising. I hear from them all the time. Mm-hmm. Toxic masculinity. We don't talk about toxic femininity. We don't talk about men trying to be the producers for families, the father, the leader of a household. I think a lot of men are lost, and I think black men feel that too.
Well, I would say this to you: you're not totally wrong, but you're far from right. Okay, and
that's always a good start.
By the way, you sound like my wife.
I met her; she's a wonderful woman, by the way. But here's the deal: certainly that may have played somewhat of a role, but black men are like most men. Affordability, the economy. You understand? I mean, how much money you going to put in my pocket? How much taxes am I going to pay? How can I afford to provide for and to protect my family? You want safety in the streets? Certainly you don't want to see people getting arrested and being let out of jail the same day. Now, we all know that the liberals were guilty of that. Yep. I would never accuse the conservatives of being guilty of such a thing. You know what I'm saying? And I got a lot of issues with the conservatives. That ain't one of them. When you talk about Trump and you look at him, you know that if it wasn't for COVID, in all likelihood, he probably would have won re-election in 2020.
That's right.
And so you take those things into consideration, and it's important to understand that affordability, the economy, was a big, big, big issue. And then when you take into account immigration, and the position, it's not so, listen, everybody knows immigrants help build this nation. And if you're smart about America, you don't want completely closed borders and don't want anybody in. But when you let 12 to 14 million people cross the border illegally, that is problematic. And if you think, and as often, I know this might offend some people, but you'll get over it. But because I've religiously said it, and I'll say it again. When white folks catch a cold, black folks catch pneumonia. No matter what goes on in this world that's problematic for white folks, it is always worse for black folks if it's bad for white folks. If you got unemployment and it's hovering around 4.5% for the white community, it's 7.5% for the black community. It's even worse for black men. Certainly it's affecting black women more than ever before, more than usual in this point in time. We know that. And so as a result of it, when you're looking at those certain situations, and these are the kind of things that the liberal movement was promoting, oblivious to the, or not caring enough about the ultimate detrimental impact it would have, there were people that rose up and said, enough of this, because since 1964, when Lyndon B. Johnson told the world, you know what, when we pass civil rights legislation, okay, guess what? We'll have the Negroes voting for us for the next 200 years. And sure enough, over the past 60 years or so, a vast majority of African Americans have voted Democrat. We know that if we're doing our homework, we serve to disenfranchise ourselves, because we told the Democratic Party, you got our vote no matter what. We told the Republicans, you ain't getting our vote no matter what. Neither was incentivized to really put forth an effort to give us the representation we deserved. And as a result, we disenfranchised ourselves, but we're not seeing it that way. You got migrants coming to this country that clearly see it that way. Look at the Hispanic population. You got Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Guatemalans, Cubans, everything. And you don't know who's going to vote what. So guess what? Both sides are trying to appeal to them, which means they're not being ignored. That's the game. And unfortunately, we as a black community lost our way in that regard. And not only that, it's turned so many other communities off against us because they've said, what are y'all doing? Do you not see that this is working against you? So this was a huge, huge step, no matter how much we may lament it because of some of the things that we're seeing right now with these tariff wars and other things that we're seeing and National Guards in different cities. We're still seeing certain things that make us say, yo, We don't want to go back to what it was like in 2023.
I do want to interject just for a moment. I want to go to sports here for a moment because we're already.
By the way, I think Stephen A. is actually a Republican. He just doesn't realize it yet.
Is that true, Stephen?
That is not true. I do have, listen,
okay.
I am fiscally conservative. Listen, I don't like paying high taxes. New York, New Jersey, California, I can't stand it. That's why I bought a house in Florida. Flip side to it, however, is that I am socially liberal. I believe in living and let living as long as you're not harming our society.
By the way, I wish instead of running for president that Stephen A. were running for mayor because he'd be way better than any of the choices New York City's dealing with right now.
I want to move to a sports-related topic that I know you guys definitely will disagree on.
Sure.
And let's talk about the NBA. You mentioned Adam Silver was here just a few moments ago. Let's talk about the future of the NBA and what it is. Clay, you have said wokeness has broken the NBA and the league is heading to rock bottom. Stephen A., you have called Adam Silver the best commissioner in sports, but you have also said they've taken the toughness out of it and it's a soft league. So
he's one of, because I think Roger Goodell is right up there. But
okay. But Clay, I'll ask you this. Is the NBA great or has it cratered?
It's cratered. Stephen A. is wrong about this. I think Adam Silver is the worst commissioner that any league has had in any recent history. Now, caveat on that. It can be the case that it's good for the business because he has certainly monetized the NBA at a phenomenal level, right? Well, he's got Amazon paying money. He's got NBC paying money. All the guys that you've been talking to on this stage, ESPN paying money. But I think he has destroyed the brand of the NBA in the process. And I think he has destroyed the NBA, as I said, by getting way too involved in politics. And I'll give you an example that has nothing to do with race necessarily. He decided he was going to pull the All-Star game out of Charlotte. I think it was in 2017 because of a transgender bathroom bill. And then they moved the All-Star game. And that's where I think he started to make poor decisions and lose some of the NBA's overall good bona fides that have been built up with Jordan and Bird and Magic over the years. All right. Then he decides they want to be he's trying to create a global brand. You can't identify a location and attribute the politics to it because it opens huge hypocrisies when you go into Beijing, China, when you go into the Middle East. And I'll give you an example. In the Middle East, I think they're playing in the UAE, I believe. You can be beheaded if you are gay in the UAE. I don't blame the NBA for that. I think the WWE goes all over the place. Saudi Arabia, they put on events. The WWE has said, hey, we want everybody to be a fan of wrestling. We're not trying to change the politics of a place based on the decisions we made. I think Adam Silver, because he lives in New York City, because he is a left-leaning individual, decided to interject his own personal politics on behalf of the league, and I think he has alienated huge numbers of people because of it.
What do you think, Stephen A.?
I think he's wrong, but what else is new?
Okay, so the NBA is great.
Respectfully, listen, Clay, I keep saying Trey. Clay makes valid points. I understand. I truly do. What I would say, however, is this. There's a difference between supporting something and supporting not being restrictive to something. And I think that's what a lot of folks on the conservative side miss. They're talking about, if I'm not trying to say that, we should have we shouldn't have gender-specific bathroom. I'm not one of those, listen, I transgender, I believe they should have, I think everybody in the LGBTQ plus community should have the same rights that all of us have. But in the same breath, that shouldn't include your right to play. You know, you're Steven, and then you decide that you're Stephanie, and then all of a sudden you get to play in women's sports. I don't think that's fair. And I think when you sort of swim at the University of Pennsylvania, as a man, you were ranked something like 400th or something in the world, and then you transition to being a female and you rank number 1. I mean, that's evidence right there that there's something wrong with that picture. Not to mention the fact, how fair is it to those young ladies out there who were born as young ladies competing against the competition? I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment to say. But I also think it's important to point out that you have some people who wanted to infringe on other folks' rights simply because they were that way and they don't like them. And when you have somebody like Adam Silver or Roger Goodell or Gary Bettman or anybody else who is of the mindset that, listen, we don't want to play a role in being restrictive about the rights of another human being or an American citizen, you have to pay attention to that. That's not always the same as completely condoning everything they want to do. You just don't want to play a part in the restrictive tendencies that a particular party may have, especially in a political climate where everybody is using every pronoun, every noun, every syllable imaginable to gain an advantage that will curry votes at the voting booth. There's a level of sensitivity that comes heightened because of that, and you have to be sensitive to.
All right, we only got 20 minutes, by the way, so we have a lot of other things we got to get to. Let's move to President Trump here. There's obviously going to be a UFC fight on the way. I know exactly. There's going to be I was trying to find common ground around here, right? There's obviously going to be a UFC fight on the White House lawn. The president has demanded that the Cleveland Guardians change their name. He's even threatened to hold up a new stadium deal for Washington's NFL team if they do not restore their old name.
Which he can't do.
And just this last week, he called the NFL's new kickoff rule, quote unquote, sissy football. Clay, I will start with you. How seriously should sports leagues take President Trump?
Very. I mean, he's the president of the United States. I think you should take him seriously on everything. Now, kickoff rules, the president is a real sports fan. Let me say that. I think lots of politicians pretend to be sports fans, and then they come out and they can't pronounce guys' names, and they don't know the basics of being fans. President's a real fan. He likes Stephen A. He watches ESPN. He watches Outkick Show. Like, he is a real sports fan. I think the president is very conscious of symbolic issues. And Alcatraz, example. I think the idea of turning Alcatraz into a prison doesn't make a ton of sense given the cost and the number of people that you could hold there. Alligator or Alcatraz or whatever the heck it's called. Symbolically, these things also, for him, resonate. And I think what he sees is, and this is what I've come to see, because I used to be a Democrat. I used to vote.
You used to vote for Obama.
I voted for Obama back in the day. And then the Democrats went crazy, and I feel like I didn't move at all. But I think when you look at the Trump angle on the Redskins, for instance, I think he sees this as progressives always demand more change, right? So if Stephen A. and I were reasonable people, and I think we are, and we added 3 or 4 other reasonable people, and we said, hey, we're just going to negotiate nicknames once and for all, and we're going to close the door on this forever. I don't think people on the left would ever be happy, because you change Redskins, you change Indians, what do? Kansas City Chiefs can't do the tomahawk chop at the Atlanta Braves. Is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish? Is that an offensive mascot that we have to change as well? You constantly are finding reasons to be offended. And I think what the president is saying is we have to go back to an era where you're not always offended. And I would say on the Redskins name in particular, if the United States is going to be providing land for the stadium, as they potentially are in the District of Columbia, and if they are going to be providing some form of tax incentives, which it appears that they are as a federal government, I don't think it's crazy for the president to say, hey, Redskins should come back. And here's my idea, which I think is a brilliant idea, humbly. I think they should just have a Native American entranceway to the new stadium with all of the greatest Indian heroes that have ever existed, intermix them with legends of Redskins past, and have statues all the way in and say, hey, we're here to celebrate. I just came back from FSU. One of the coolest ways to start a football game is when they run out with that flaming spear and they stab it down center field for the honor of the Seminole tribe. So I think the president is getting at the symbolic nature of the names, and I agree with him on that.
Stephen A., what do you think? And do you agree with Clay that the Washington team should go back to their original name, even though there are Native American groups who find that name deeply offensive?
No, I don't. What I would say to you is that you're white, you're black, you're not Native American. Who are you to define what is offensive to somebody? You know, I'm not a Jewish individual, but I leave it to the Jewish community to define for me what is anti-Semitic and what is not. I am a black man. If I tell you this is offensive to black people, that should be enough. And I'm not talking about me personally or me as one individual. I'm talking about as if a group of people are telling you, this is our culture, this is our history, this is what we believe, this is how we feel. And for the vast majority of it, from a collective perspective, they tell you this is offensive to them. That should be enough, because that's truly what America is all about. It's a reasonable. Think about me and Clay Travis sitting up here. Whoever thought that we would sit on a stage together? Do you know why we could sit on the stage together and talk? Because we could have this kind of conversation and we could disagree, and I'm not going to leave hating him tomorrow. I'm just going to continue to talk to him, and he's going to continue to talk to me. And every time we talk to one another, we're going to butt heads a little bit about this particular subject until one of us bends or breaks and lean towards being supportive of where the other is coming from. And that's that. And unfortunately, we have a president right now. And listen, this is very, very hard for me. You ain't hear people talk about this. They ain't never accused me of this. I haven't called this man a racist. I haven't compared him to Nazis. I haven't done something. I knew Donald Trump. Donald Trump in 2014 called me personally. He wanted to buy the Buffalo Bills. The price tag, okay, was $1.4 billion, okay? Hard to believe, considering the fact that Dallas Cowboys right now are worth $13 billion. But that's how much the NFL has grown. $1.4 billion. According to my sources, he had $1.1 billion. And Trump said to me, quote, and I've said this many times publicly, if them MFers stand in my way and prevent me from getting ownership of the Buffalo Bills, talk about the league owners, he said, I'm going to get them all back. I'm going to run for president. And so we see what has happened in this day and age. When I listen to him speak about sports-related stuff, specifically when it pertains to the NFL, I know the man's petty. And I tell him that to his face. I'm not questioning his policies right now. That's a subject for another day. I'm not questioning some of the things that he does involving the National Guards in states as opposed to Washington, D.C., which is run by the federal government. I'm not going there. I'm simply saying you're the president of the United States. Statesmanship is kind of nice. You talk about regaining normalcy and trying not to find everything offensive. Well, why don't you work not to be offensive? Why don't you work not to offend everybody you can? I mean, he comes up with, and don't get me wrong, some of it is hilarious. When he calls, when he says certain things about certain people, I'm not going to bring up anything that he says right now, but he says a lot of things that are flat out hysterical. It really, really is. But in the same breath, you also find yourself saying, damn, did you have to go there? Did you have to do this? Why are you involving yourself with the Redskins name? You don't have better things to do. Isn't Russia and Ukraine still at war? A war that you vowed to end in one day? Has Hamas released all the hostages? Didn't you say that that's something that you would resolve in a day? I appreciate what you've done with the borders now, but did you have to bring the National Guard into Los Angeles? Do you have to call a sitting governor named Newsom new scum? Do you have to threaten the city of Chicago, Memphis, Baltimore, for example, where Governor Westmore is coming on television and reminding us he is the commander-in-chief of the state of Maryland, not you. Constitutionally, you don't have a right to do that. Do you have to be an individual that's so abrasive and so acerbic at times that a country is divided because they're caught up in how you act instead of what you do? Those are the kind of things that we're looking at Clay Travis and others and saying, yo, fellas, ladies, y'all gonna say something about that? Because if anybody else had acted like that, they can't get away. I understand he's a once in a generation kind of dude, but when Steve Bannon comes on my show, along with others, and say, that Constitution that we've been vowing about, that we're so supportive of, that we're so dogged about, we're going to work to circumvent and violate the 22nd Amendment just so he could get a third term because he's a once-in-a-generational dude. And people who live off the Constitution got radio shows, television shows, podcasts, YouTube channels, and all of this other stuff. They're sitting up there going like this. I know we said that before, but we're going to stand down on this one because we like what we're hearing.
He's not going to run in 28. He likes to get a rise out of people.
That ain't the point. Did you speak against it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's not going to run. He's not going to run in 28. You're right. A lot of people don't say what they actually think. That's all I'm saying. And by the way, I would suggest one reason that Stephen A. has success. I would suggest one reason I have success. There's not really very much difference between what I would say in this mic, and I bet the case is the same for you, and what I would say at a bar having a beer with somebody, what I would say at dinner. There is no difference, right? What I would say about the Trump comments on the National Guard is I actually think this is one where Trump deserves way more credit across the political spectrum because what he did in Washington, D.C. saved a lot of lives. Most of the lives he saved were black. because most of the victims of violent crime in Washington, D.C. are black. I live in the state of Tennessee. I live in Nashville. He said yesterday he's going into Memphis. When I grew up, Memphis, Nashville is a rivalry. People grow up in different states. You talk all the time, like, what's the best city in a state? When I was a kid, we'd go back and forth with kids from Memphis, like, hey, Nashville's better, Memphis better. For the last 20 years, nobody's made the argument. Nashville made good decisions. Memphis became dangerous. And the people who are bearing the brunt of violence are overwhelmingly black in those cities. I actually think Trump deserves an immense amount of credit because a lot of Republicans would sit back and say, I don't care about the violence. I think a lot of white people who live in Northwest, frankly, Washington, D.C., in rich neighborhoods with a lot of private security in Georgetown and all those areas, they sit around and they want to argue against Trump bringing security to the Capitol because they live behind gates and they have their own armed security already. People who can't afford that, overwhelmingly black, brown, live in minority neighborhoods that are racked with violence. Trump's trying to solve it. And I actually think he deserves credit because rich white politicians often pretend black violence and inner city violence doesn't exist. Trump's actually trying to address it.
Stephen, really quickly, we have to get back to sports, but really quickly, I'll let you respond. We do have a couple other things in our 10 minutes left.
In the city of Chicago, I don't give a damn what they say. I have no problem with sending in the National Guard. They were a problem before Obama got into office when he was a junior senator. They was a problem when he was in office for 8 years as a president. They've been a problem now. And I've seen black people come on television locally and nationally crying for support, whether it's the National Guard or whatever it takes. In other words, the city of Chicago has had ample opportunity to do something about it. And I do think it's a crisis in that city. However, even though Baltimore is bad, even though some would say St. Louis is bad, even though some would say there's other cities, there has been progress, at least statistically, according to these folks, where they've shown they were doing it without them in terms of improvement, and they saw the problems were being addressed in a more productive manner. And on top of it all, they've made it clear they don't need the assistance of the president. What does he do? He ignores them when he chooses to, depending on their rhetoric. We see one politician after another, along with other supporters, members of his cabinet. It's almost like it's a damn requirement to fawn over this man. He's the president of the United States. I respect him. Yeah. And when I see him, which I will see him in next month, by the way, you know what? I'm going to show him his respect as the 47th president of the United States. But there's not going to be any fawning, because guess what? There's not a lot to fawn over. Some things you do right, some things you do wrong. Call it on the carpet. When you have congressional figures whose middle name should be capitulation because they stand on Capitol Hill as members of the GOP and are literally scared to pronounce his name wrong or without the appropriate level of affection and fawning that's required, that's a problem because we're relying on elected officials to help supervise our government to make sure this land of law and order that we talk about, a nation of laws, is being honored by the executive, by the elected officials we put in the office. When you're not doing your job, he gets away with doing whatever he wants to do. And then y'all want to blame communities for how they stand up in chaos, lamenting what he's elected to do, when if y'all did what y'all was supposed to do, it wouldn't be required. So again, there's blame to go around, not to absolve folks that are committing crimes, not to absolve communities that ain't doing a damn thing, but let's not act like they're the only guilty culprits.
All right,
there's a whole bunch of that.
We got a couple other things I want to get to in the last little bit of time that we got. Stephen A., I'm going to ask this question to you. I'm going to have Clay respond to this. Stephen A., Clay has claimed that sports media networks like ESPN have different rules for conservatives and liberals to speak about politics. Is that true?
No. Look at how I talk. ESPN never bothers me. Ever. Bob Iger, Dana Walden, Deborah O'Connell, Jimmy Pitaro, Burke Magnus, Dave Roberts. I've been at ESPN since 2003. I was gone in 2009 and 2011 because of contract dispute. I've come back with a roar in 2011, and obviously I'm sitting a little pretty right now. I'm good, okay? I think that anybody that has seen me on the air knows that I'm not scared to say what needs to be said, how it needs to be said, when I damn well want to. Now, here's where the trick comes in. You have too many people, and this goes to Disney, Fox, NBC. You have to be respectful and cognizant of the brand you represent. That's business. I am going to do everything that I can to be as true and authentic as I can possibly be 100% of the time. But I'm not going to sit out here and act like I have no regard nor any sensitivity to Disney. That's nonsense. I have a new show with SiriusXM. Scott Greenstein, the president of content, this man will tell you every day, all day, say what you want. You can say anything you want on this platform. Yeah, whatever. It's SiriusXM. I have to be mindful of it. Now, that doesn't mean that I muzzle myself, but it does mean that when I speak in a manner that I'm cognizant of the brand that I represent. I love how we see so many people in our business because, respectfully, they're all liars who deny this. You got these people that go on the air, I can say whatever I want to say, do whatever I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it, but I got my hand out for your money. That's just not true. And what we have to, I remember, and I'm not going to say his name, but it's a media columnist, and he was getting on me years ago because Hugh Douglas, went at one of our colleagues, and I didn't say anything about it on the next day. And I looked at him and I said, well, you work with this columnist every day who's been raising hell and has said one controversial thing after another. I've never seen you write a sentence about him. Why not? Because he works for your company and y'all had the same boss. That's an accident? That's a coincidence? Of course it isn't. We understand that even though we can be our true, authentic selves and we can say what we want to say, when we want to say it, how we want to say it, it's being an adult to be mindful that you work for somebody and you represent them too, not just yourself. That's all.
All right, Clay, what do you think? Do you agree with Stephen A?
I think Stephen A can say what he wants because he's the most powerful person at ESPN, and I actually think ESPN needs Stephen A more than Stephen A needs ESPN now. And I do think in general we're in an era where individual talent, the name on the back of the jersey matters more than the name on the front of the jersey, if you want to put it that way. I think look, I've not been ever employed at ESPN, so I can't speak directly for what anybody does there. I think you can see the stories that Sage Steele, for instance, has told about her ability to say what she thinks. I mean, they suspended her for saying that she didn't think anybody should be required to get the COVID shot. I think you can see what Sam Ponder said when she said and spoke out. I'm glad Stephen A is on the side of sanity here, but when she spoke out on men and women's sports, she says that ESPN PR immediately reached out to her and said, you can't do this. I suspect that there are different rules for different people based on their respective power inside of an organization. I think Stephen A is at the apex. I would point to one other person, and she's done great work, sideline reporter for Fox now. She said, I'm not going to get the COVID shot and because I'm trying to have a baby. And Disney said, you'll get that or you're fired. And they fired her. I think if she had said, hey, it's important for everybody to go get the COVID shot and done public pronouncements on that, I think they would have rewarded her. So I think, with all due respect to Stephen A., I think the most important diversity is diversity of thought. And I don't know the answer because people keep their politics private. But
I got the answer, but go ahead.
I don't know how many people that go on First Take voted for Donald Trump. You may know, I'm not asking you to put people out publicly, but I think if a show had that diversity of thought, and I think networks across the board need more diversity of thought because that's how you reach better outcomes. Look, everybody watching us right now, we've disagreed on a lot. People can hear his arguments, they can hear my arguments, they can think we're both wrong, they can think I'm right, he's wrong, or he's right, I'm wrong. That's healthy. And I think we need more diversity of thought. I don't think there's very much in sports media. I think there's Outkick, and then I think there's everybody else.
Not Barstool. You don't group Barstool in that with you?
I think Barstool is humor. That's the way that I would. Now they're at Fox now, but I think those guys, if you said, "Hey, what's the general zeitgeist of Barstool?" I think they would say we do sports and humor. I think you would say Outkick does sports and politics and culture, and so everything's a little bit different. There's different lanes, but diversity of thought. And I don't know that ESPN has given even rights to diversity of opinion historically.
ESPN doesn't come, as you would say, I would know, because I've been there since 2003 for the most part, with the exception of 2009 to 2011. They don't come to us telling us what to say. And one of the things that I love about Jimmy Pitaro, the president of ESPN, certainly we have to be guarded or whatever, but it's also about who you trust too. He trusts me to be responsible in what I say. He doesn't trust me to say what he wants me to say.
Yeah.
He trusts me to be responsible in what I say. What does that mean exactly? Let's iron this out and let's talk business and let's understand what it is. If you are a host on NBA Countdown or a host on NFL Countdown and you're attached to the NFL brand and your political positions come across the airwaves of that particular show, and it cost millions of dollars because an advertiser or a sponsor is turned off by what you had to say, and then ESPN, CBS, NBC, or anybody else laments that, are they limiting, diversity of thought and your political speech because of their beliefs? No. They're saying this has affected our bottom line. Now, I don't know anybody in the world of business that is educated about what affects the bottom line, knows this has a negative effect, goes out there and does it anyway, and expects their wallets to be padded. It doesn't work that way. That's not a business coming to you and saying to you, we want to restrict your political opinions and your diversity of thoughts. That's a business coming to you and say, don't you like getting paid? We do too. And this money is dissipating before our very eyes because of the positions that you take. Why am I successful? I'm going to tell you why I'm successful at ESPN. Because I woke up one day in 2010 and I said, I know exactly what the hell has been wrong with me, and I figured it out. And I wake up every day. How do I make my bosses more money? How do I get some of it? Now, I haven't always been successful. There's a few people in here that were my bosses that I thought I could have done a better job for. And I'm sorry I wasn't as good as I needed to be. But damn it, I tried. Yeah. Because I went there and I said, I am trying to make you money. Now, I want some of it now, but I'm trying to make you money. I didn't ask you for a job looking to cost you money. Yeah. And you got too many people in our business that really talk and they chirp about what they want. But what they really want is the ability to operate with impunity while padding their wallet without no accountability to your bottom line.
I want Clay to respond, but I have one last question after.
So I agree 100%. I think it's good life advice. If there's kids out there watching, if there's young people out there watching, whatever you can do to make your boss more money, that's how you should focus. And the number of people who have jobs that don't understand that basic reality stuns me. I don't think they talk enough about it with kids. I think that's good advice. What I would say in response to that in general is this. Who has been fired or not had their contract renewed for being too left-wing at ESPN?
Who's been fired?
Or let go.
Who's been fired or let go for misbehaving in a way that, dare I say, wasn't conservative?
Oh, I think, look,
throughout the years,
if you get involved in all sorts of hijinks related to all sorts of things, right? But I think you can point to many different people at ESPN that are on the right that have not gotten contracts renewed. I don't think you can point to anyone on the left because of left-wing opinions.
And I would say to you respectfully, without mentioning names, because I respect the hell out of my colleagues, but there's some people that will let go because they weren't resonating. They weren't making the company money, and the company's not going to come out and say, you didn't make us money. But I assure you, I swear to you, I can promise you on my soul, there are an abundance of people that worked at ESPN and has worked in the business of broadcasting that want to get paid and don't do a damn thing to move the needle. But they ain't going to come out and say, we don't move the needle. They're going to come out and say, oh, we were treated unfairly. Because if you really, really got to the brass tacks of it all and you sure that they weren't moving the needle, not only would they be gone from ESPN, they'd be gone from everywhere because nobody would hire them because they don't contribute to the bottom line.
Okay, we got one last thing. We're already over time already, but I have to ask this. Stephen A., we're going to start with you on this. This is all about the future. Yeah. Last month, you were just on Bill Maher. You were asked the question if you were going to run for president. You have continued to say it is possible, and I want to quote you directly. You said, quote, I'm officially leaving all doors open for a 2028 run. I hate the thought of being a politician, but I'm sick of this mess. So can you, in front of this audience and everybody that's watching right now on X, state your intentions right now or any timeline you have for future political aspirations?
I have no desire whatsoever to be a politician. life is really, really good. And I don't really want to compromise it at all. But I've been asked by various people, including my pastor, including people in this business and others, to keep an open mind because you never know what the state of affairs in this country will be in a couple of years. And as a result, they said to me, could you at least stop saying no? Could you at least say, I'll leave the door open, even if you are willing to admit you sincerely 99% doubt that you would ever run for office. So that's what I did. I will say this, though, and it might be cocky and arrogant as hell, but I truly believe it. If I don't believe I could go out there and generate, campaign dollars. I'm not a beggar. And I can't go out there and ask people for your money and could you please support my campaign? I can't do that. But if I didn't have to worry about all of that and it was just my ideas and my positions against yours, I think I'd win the Democratic nomination. I think I can beat anybody on the circuit, period. And I can tell you this, I'd give anything, and I mean anything, to be on a debate stage with some of these politicians considering what they have done to this country over the years. I don't give a damn about running for office. If I could just get on the stage with them, just to tell them to their face in front of tens of millions of people the damage both sides of the aisle have done to this country. I can't say it enough, because the last point I want to say is this. Clay Travis and I might be on opposite sides, but he's absolutely right. In some things, we're not that far apart. But most importantly, whatever happened to saying, you know what you said was absolutely right. I know I felt this way, but you're right. You got a good point. And I agree with you. And I'm going to change my thinking on that. And getting him to do the same. That's what it's about. That's about if we thought like that, we'd be a better country. But unfortunately, I think the folks on Capitol Hill have played us like pawns and manipulated us to such a degree that the polarization that exists with all of us is instigated by them, and we're the suckers who fall for it. And it has to stop, because we're the ones that are doing the most harm to one another, while they sit on their perches in Capitol Hill and just act like they're complaining with each other and acting like that's the definition of work. They're not working on behalf of the best interests of this country. They're working on behalf of themselves when they do that, and I want that to stop.
Sounds like a stump speech to me. Clay, follow-up for you. You have said on the April 14th edition of Outkick, quote, if Stephen A. runs for president in 2028, I might have to run for president too. I think I might be a better presidential candidate than Stephen A. I think I would smoke Stephen A. in a nationwide election. So, Clay, would you declare today that if Stephen A. does indeed run for president, that you will too?
First of all, I think one thing that Stephen A. and I definitely have in common is we do not lack for self-confidence.
That is true.
And I mean, in all honesty, you can't do the job that we do in the world in which we live now if you're worried about how people are going to react every single moment of every single day about what we say. I said earlier, and I'm not even kidding, I think New York City, Stephen A. would be a better mayor in New York City than any of the candidates that are right now running. I would vote for him if I lived in New York City over everybody else that's out there. I think what Stephen A. is hitting on here is something that the Democrats need. They've lost men. They've lost men who can sit and talk to men in a normal way. They thought Tim Walz was that guy. And Tim Walz is, as I've said before, a Democrat lesbian's idea of a man that's going to appeal to men, right? They have no idea how to speak to men anymore. I think Trump does. White, black, Asian, Hispanic men. You go look, he's increased every single race his support among men. Now, women, he's got issues, but men, he's done very well. And I think what Stephen A. gets is we're sick of professional politicians. I'll tell you this. When I started, Buck Sexton and I started together, when I left Sports Talk Radio full-time and went to take over with Buck after Rush died, I expected to be really impressed by the intelligence and the bravery of politicians. A lot of them are morons and they're cowards. And I think what he's hitting at is something that the nation agrees with. We got a lot of people that are not advocating in the best interest of the country. and they don't have an ability to understand what the average guy or gal is going through. We talk on our radio show to a lot of people who are struggling to pay mortgages, who are worried about getting their kids into college, who are worried about being able to have enough money at the end of the month to pay off the credit card bill, to pay the car payment. And I do think basic economics, many people are feeling left behind. Having said all that, if Stephen A. runs, I'll run and I'll kick his ass.
All right, that's what I wanted to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give him...
Hold on.
All right, really quickly.
No, he wouldn't. He'd get his ass kicked.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. Because he's somewhat rigid. In other words, you'd appeal to your base, no doubt. But I'm more of a centrist with the capability to appeal to both sides. So he'd get a segment of the country. I'd get everything around it, and I'd win.
Well, not surprisingly,
I really hope if you both declare, I will be the moderator for that. Can we please give a big round of applause for Stephen A. Smith and Clay Travis? Thank you, guys. Thank you, of course, to all of you who have been watching wherever you are on X and everybody being here. There is a cocktail reception outside. Thank you guys so much for being here for Front Office Sports Tuned In.
That was awesome. Really well done.